sorry, something went wrong. When you're ready, give it another try.
Okay, one more try. Just one more try. That's all you need to do. Just keep trying.
It's too hard for me.
Yo Gabba Gabba, you remember that show? My son, there was this time when we watched Yo Gabba Gabba together. There was this song, it was called Keep Trying. I loved that song. Keep trying.
Keep trying, don't give up.
Sometimes we just need to hear that, you know? Don't stop, don't give up. Don't stop, don't give up. You don't have to give up. You gotta keep trying. That's when the good things happen. It's when you don't give up, even if you want to. You don't.
I did it!
And we've had a lot of mentors in our lives, right? If we've lived a certain amount of years, we've had a lot of people in our lives that are teachers and mentors and guides. And if you think about it, I bet you can pull up some influential teachers that you've had in your life. And which teacher was your favorite? What do you remember? Which teachers were really good? So when you have a person in your mind, I want you to hold on to that person, or if there's more than one person and you're lucky, hold on to multiple people in your mind as your best teachers, your favorite teachers. And take a minute to think about what it was that makes them your favorite. They knew their content well, they were smart, or they were patient. But most likely, my guess is that they made you feel like they cared about you. They cared about what happened to you. That's pretty much the definition of a good guide or mentor. It's that they care about you on your journey, so you get the information that they've experienced, they have it, they can give it to you, so you can go on to that next step, cross the threshold, way more prepared for the journey in some way. Once we're out of the institutional bonds or bounds of required schooling, we do have a chance to choose the people we learn from. We don't have to just, what teacher you got? Oh God, her? Oh. Many years ago, I decided to dig into learning astrology myself very consciously. I said, I'm doing this. I remember it was a really big deal for me to just buy a book, an astrology book, my first astrology book ever. After I read all these intros, I knew when I'd found my first teacher, and it was Stephen Forrest. He's a really well-known evolutionary astrologer. So I bought his book, The Inner Sky. I found him witty, intelligent, good storyteller. He makes astrology really accessible, fun to read. So fast forward a few years later, I figured out that Stephen Forrest was actually within driving distance, like an hour and a half from where I lived. And so I got a reading on the books with him. I had to wait 16 or 18 months. It was a long time. When I found myself sitting in front of him in his home office in Borrego Springs in the desert, by this time I'd read all of his books, and I was in seventh heaven just getting to sit there with him. I really respected him and wanted to hear what he had to say about me and my chart. And after, was it 2.5 hours, man? It was long. And I didn't say a word, so Stephen Forrest talked the whole entire time. And when I left that meeting, I was a little bit dazed and a little bit in awe because I felt really seen. And Stephen Forrest had translated my birth chart. He'd interpreted it as a mentor, as a guide. That's kind of how it felt. The main message that I got from that, the details were interesting too, but the main message I got from him was that I was deliberately made. I had a birth chart that was more than just this random concoction of planetary placements connected together by my random birth. It was not about that, no. This was a message, a map that was designed, a user manual, for lack of a better word, just for me, from space, from outer space. And it was my map, it was my myth, it was my undiscovered story. Yeah. So then I went off into the unknown with my little map with a few words of wisdom from a mentor, from a guide. And that was the beginning of my astrology journey, really. And I found some other teachers along the way. I came to some deep understandings of myself and astrology through that passage. Fast forward to September 2023. I opened up my email and I saw this email newsletter from Stephen Forrest. His title got me this time. And the topic of his newsletter was exploring the connection between spirituality and astrology. Those are two of my main interests, spirituality and astrology, so he got me there. In addition, to his newsletter, he gives a link to his talk that he gave at a recent astrology convention. And that's here on YouTube. So I'll link that in the description below. I highly recommend giving it a look. And listening to him again after all these years really brought back so many memories, but it also sparked a new line of thinking in me astrologically. I want to share these findings with you. In minute 7 of his talk, he describes the Hindu concept of the Atman and the Brahman. The Atman is your soul, and the Brahman is infinite divinity. So the idea is that these two things are one thing. He says, the further you go, the bigger it gets, until eventually, deep in the core of you, is everything, the divine. All spiritual paths are suspicious of us getting too identified with our ego as if it was the only reality. So much of astrology is about you and your story, you and your version of life, you and your narrative and explanation of yourself. And that struck a chord in me. When I went into my journey with astrology, I really wanted to understand myself, and that was real. That was real, my desire. I didn't want to read astrology charts for other people or be on YouTube or be an astrologer at all. I just wanted to understand what was my deal, what were my issues, and how could I work through them to be happy, to get happier. And was that egotistical? There is a point in reductivist astrology that can lead to that answer being yes. Yeah, some astrology is narcissistic. Some astrology is really, not helpful to the collective. It's not the real thing. The real questions require real answers that are not easy to get to. So thinking about that, I asked myself, why did I need to focus on myself or my sign or my planets or my houses and so on? When we focus just on ourselves and we leave it there for astrology, or when I'm not sure exactly what to say about that. I feel like there's a point where in any journey that we're trying to find for self-awareness, that it could get stuck in a loop where you're just stuck in your own issues, where you're stuck in the woe is me, oh, well, this happened to me, or I have this terrible moon in wherever and it's aspecting this or that. But when it's not self-obsessive and locked, it can be used really to be just the opposite of narcissistic. Most of our problems in society, I believe, can be reduced to our lack of real, genuine, loving spiritual guidance with no agenda. A real true guide that just loves us and cares for us and wants the best, that brings meaning, okay? We have generally no rituals. At least in America, I don't know, maybe other places, but in Western society in general, I believe the rituals are missing. No real foundations of strength. Many of those 17 steps in the hero's journey are missing. They're just eliminated. And so we get caught up in the rough steps, like step 6, which is the road of trials, and languish there with no real knowledge of how to get on with the trip. Just stuck. Socrates coined the axiom, know thyself. And Aristotle followed that up with, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. When we have very few real spiritual guidance options to lean on, we can get lost really fast. And many of us do not know ourselves. No, we don't. Who we were as children in the undomesticated state is a good clue to look back there. But children grow up and we have to conform, for the most part, to be accepted and follow the prescription of expected scripts in life. You do this, and so on. Things are changing a little bit now, but for the most part, that's where most of us came from. And many of us, if we're watching astrology and talking about astrology, we're not conformists. we're a little different. And that could lead to some painful separation or abuse or damage in some way or another, because we aren't falling in lock and step with the way things should be. And that makes living in this world even harder, and finding that path back to ourselves even more challenging. The Atman and the Brahman, that Stephen Forrest brings up in his talk, is that intersection between the soul and the infinite divine as one. And he says the further you go into yourself, there's something of an excavation. And that's where the secret garden analogy comes in here. When I was a kid, one of my favorite stories was The Secret Garden. It's a story about a 10-year-old girl named Mary who was born in India. She had these wealthy parents who never wanted her, and they really made an effort to just ignore her. She was a real pain in the butt. This cholera outbreak happens and it wipes out her parents, a lot of the servants, and so she survives. But she can't stay in India by herself, so she's taken to go live in this big spooky version of Downton Abbey kind of place. Mr. Craven is her uncle. And oh yeah, by the way, he's also a hunchback, which makes him even scarier apparently when you're in a kid's story. So she was really afraid of him. And when she learns about this secret garden, Mary becomes a bit obsessed with finding this garden.
Why was that garden locked up?
So she starts exploring. Eventually she finds this stone wall, this big door, and somehow or another she also finds a key. I want you to imagine a very thick stone wall. It's overgrown with unkempt greenery, and the door has been hidden. It's very hard to find, and there's a lock, and it's covered with debris and dirt. When you find your birth chart, your own personal map, that's akin to finding the hidden door. That's the entry point to your secret garden, where you can cross the threshold on the path towards self-realization. You know, part of our life experience is to uncover the puzzle of who we are and what we're here to do and how to find happiness and fulfillment and meaning in life. And your garden may be abandoned or neglected, or maybe it's overrun or abused or overgrown. Maybe the trees haven't been trimmed or pruned, and maybe there are thorny rose vines all over that don't have flowers. They're just this thorny mess. This garden inside of you needs attention in a lot of ways, not just one way. And you need a plan. You need a place to start. The garden requires observation, okay? Understanding and acceptance of what it is. And this is not easy work. It's very diligent. It's very concentrated. It takes time to clean up a messy garden. It takes a time to understand what each tree needs and each animal does, even down to the health of the soil that supports the roots of all the growing things that are going to come out, this nurturing underground treasure. The love and deliberate care you put into understanding the needs of the framework of each thing in your garden leads to an optimal holistic health of who you are. The whole picture starts to become clear. Discovering your birth chart to begin with, and the act of detangling and decoding all the messages that are within it, is uncovering your mythos, your secret story that's living within you. And it's really not that secret. It's just something that's hard for us to see without perspective, without seeing it on a map. Once we can open it up and decode it, you're like, oh yeah, I do understand that. That does happen to me, or I am like that. And that's why understanding your story, your myth mosaic, that's your chart. Joseph Campbell says, myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into human manifestation. Religions, philosophies, art, the social forms of primitive and historic man, prime discoveries in science and technology, the very dreams that blister sleep and boil up to the basic magic ring of myth. The images of myth are reflections of the spiritual potentialities in every one of us. Through contemplating these, we evoke their powers in our lives. With intentional dedication and understanding of yourself, you will become radiant, radiating your most high vibrational attunement to the living universe where the myths mingle. 20 minutes into Stephen Forrest's talk about astrology and spirituality, he talks about the ancient connection to the stars, about looking at the heavens and finding wonder all the way back in our humanity, in our human story. He says, what if the world is not something to be transcended, but to be used as an abstract principle? What if we can say the same thing about our bodies and our human lives, and thus our birth charts? They are vehicles for potential awakening. What if your birth chart may cast light on your nature and your fate? And what if it is so much more than that? What if it's your path home? What if it shows the path to the higher ground for you? Unlike religion, which will speak generically, this is your particular path. Why do you have the chart you have, is the question to ask. Yeah, it's a good question. I really don't take it lightly, what I do. I take it really seriously. If you've had a reading with me, you probably know it's excessive, almost obsessive. I really want the best for each person that comes to talk with me. I really care. I do so deeply. And it's intimate work that we're doing because I'm looking at the prima materia of an incarnation. It's the fingerprint of the great organizing, loving spirit upon them, upon you. And this direct connection to a higher consciousness is specifically individualized for each of us. It's so beautiful. Undertaking the deep purpose and the mythic messages that you have written into your life by the planets in the sky, something up in the circling around the sun. You're doing your part. You're cleaning up your part of your own little plot, your own little land, and becoming a master of your own incarnation, which will in turn elevate the collective. It turns lead connections into gold connections, and you can share your knowledge, you can share your peace, you can share your beauty with others by living intentionally along the path towards your highest potential of human expression. That's where you're gonna find it, in the birth chart. And like I said, once you find it, that's only step one. You know, you've gotten into the garden. Now you gotta clean it up and figure it out and process all those things and try to understand. Joseph Campbell said, in this life, the criterion for achievement will be courage to let go of the past with its truths, its goals, its dogmas of meaning, and its gifts. To die to the world and to come to birth from within. Tell me how? Self-awareness, spiritual path, understanding who you are, and cleaning up your own garden. If you've come to the end of this video with me, I just want to give a special heartfelt gratitude to you. It means a lot that you stayed and listened to this, and I hope it was meaningful for you. I like you just the way you are. I'll talk to you next time.